morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is that you are seeing this. We want to welcome you. Of course, if you're here this morning with us live, this is the A Better Life Together Wednesday webinar series, and this is brought to you by the A Better Life Together Inc. Bridge Project, which stands for Bridging Resources into Diverse Groups. We are always excited to have CSA San Diego County with us. Up to this point, we have heard some very, very vital information for the home buying process, for laws, and just having a better understanding of how we should maneuver as we're looking to purchase a home, as we're renting, in these different times that we have been in since we've started. I tell you, it's just been very, very valuable and exciting to be able to bring you the information. Up to this point, we've heard from Matthew Haig. He's actually on with us this morning. But we are blessed to have another member of the CSA San Diego County team, Matthew's colleague, Ixchel. And we want to do what we always do because we're still not next to each other. So we want to do the pandemic COVID clap. Don't let this hand touch this hand. We're just going to wave them at each other. And that's how we're clapping to welcome Ixchel. Ixchel, the floor is yours. The screen is yours. You can take it away.
Thank you so much, Melissa. I really appreciate it. So my name is Ixchel Morales Carey, and I am the program manager for CSA's CaliHFA program, which is the home buyer program that we have with our agency. And I'll start a little bit of information on our agency, and then I'll go on about the specifics on home buying. So CSA San Diego is a nonprofit HUD-approved agency with over 50 years of experience as fair housing advocates. We provide rental counseling and mediation in tenant and landlord issues. We also provide hate crime prevention, civil rights education for first-generation immigrants, human trafficking prevention, and civil engagement. Give me a second, I have to move full screen. So CSA San Diego's mission is to promote social justice and public welfare through programs, services, and advocacy against all forms of discrimination, including advocacy for eradicating housing discrimination to assure equal housing opportunity for all individuals. CSA is committed to promoting and enforcing fair housing laws and equal housing opportunities for all individuals who live in San Diego County. Since last year, CSA San Diego, through the California Housing Financial Agency, has had additional services that we can provide to residents of the County of San Diego. This includes credit financial management and budget counseling, home buying counseling and education programs, VA and down payment assistance counseling, home buyer education certificate for down payment programs, home preservation loan modification counseling, and more of that information can be found through our website or give us a call. One of the first steps that we do take with clients is trying to make sure if home ownership or the process of purchasing home is something that fits with their needs and lifestyles. So something we do is compare the pros and cons of being a homeowner. So we'll start with the pros and then we'll follow up with the cons. So one of the pros is that you do have control over the environment. So no longer having an owner or a manager give you a 24-hour notice to enter the unit. Now you are your sole landlord. The other thing is that you would have stability. So for the lengths of your mortgage, which could be between 50 or 30 years or more, you would be able to stay within the home versus being given a 30, 60, or 90-day notice as a tenant. Another pro is that you would get tax benefits for paying your property taxes. At the end of the year, you could use that property tax towards your regular taxes that you would do yearly, and you might see a decrease in that. Another thing is that you would be building equity in the home, and with that, you would probably also your home would be appreciating in value. In San Diego County, you do usually see the house appreciate quite a bit. But with the pros, there is the cons. So there is no guarantees. There is a decrease in mobility in being a homeowner, meaning that if you do get an offer in another city, a job offer in another city or a state, you might not be able to move as easily because you are bound to that mortgage. You might also have to consider maintenance and repair costs. So when you're a tenant, you usually call the landlord and say, hey, I need something to be repaired, but you're the sole owner, so you're responsible for any costs that are associated with maintenance and repairs. Coming with that, you would also have to consider monthly costs. On top of having to pay your monthly mortgage payments, you will also have to consider gas, electric, HOA dues if you do live in a property that has HOA, and monthly property taxes and home insurance. And lastly, it is a long-term investment. Most mortgages are between 50 and 30 years, so you would be responsible for all costs associated with that for that length of time. Once again, here is a rent versus buy. As you know, most renters are responsible for gas, electric, water, and trash, but everything after that, property taxes, homeowner insurance, repairs, and HOA dues is usually what a homeowner has to pay in addition to their mortgage. Our counseling services usually cover the following. So one of the things we do focus on is affordability for a client and a realistic way of affording a home. So we do cover and make assessments based on the following information. So we do look at clients' annual gross income, their credit history and score, what are the current mortgage rates that are lenders are providing, can a client pay down payment assistance, and if not, what down payment assistance programs are out there for them, the type of home that the client is looking for, the client's current lifestyle and future plans in regards to purchasing a home, and fees and closing costs that are associated after you've sealed the deal in regards to purchasing your home. And then what do our agencies actually provide? So we do coaching in regards to pre-purchasing. Then we do a follow-up with post-purchasing counseling. So once you do purchase that home, we can assist you with anything that would be associated in regards to your mortgage. You know, what happens if I'm unable to make a payment? What happens if I have, a disagreement or an issue regarding my lender? We do cover that kind of counseling as a follow-up. And then all our counseling is one-on-one, and usually it is multiple sessions, which can span between, 3 months, 6 months, a year, maybe 2. Our agency is usually here for the long haul in regards to counseling clients and purchasing a home, and also what happens after you purchase a home. One factor that we really do focus on is spending and tracking your expenses and bringing up your savings. This is a really important thing when a lender is looking for you to be a potential homeowner and how much they can actually allow you to borrow. So things that we focus on is track income and expenses. So we do create a saving and spending plan with that client. And that spending plan or spending plan can be between, to 3 months to a year to how long it takes you to purchase a home. But we do make a plan, sit down with you, make a plan one-on-one to see, what expenses can be cut or how we can work around it so we can maximize your savings. And then our main goal is to boost your savings and set a pattern to boost saving potentials, only because with being a homeowner, there is always additional expenses that may come up during your time as a homeowner. And then we would also evaluate your triggers. What do you overspend on, and how to address the underlying causes? This might be an assessment looking at your bank statements, or talking one-on-one on what would you like to improve in regards to your savings and as a future homeowner. And then other things that are important, we do like to assess your credit score. So the reason being is lenders are more likely to give you a loan if you've handled past borrowing responsibly. And what that means is that if you've had a car loan, if you've had student loans, if you've had credit card debt, and you've been on top of that, and lenders can see that, they're most likely going to see you as a good candidate to get a loan. And so if you're not a good candidate, then there's a higher risk loan for the lender's perspective, which means a higher interest rate percentage on the loan. So if you have a good score, you're most likely going to get a lower interest rate, meaning on the long run, you will be saving money. And then other things that we focus on is trying to determine what is a mortgage loan, the type of mortgages that are out there, meaning VA, FHA, conventional, and others. So, a mortgage loan for the most part is a deed of trust in California, a secured loan agreement between a lender and a buyer in which the property is collateral for the loan. You will usually work with either a mortgage broker or a loan officer to apply for the loan. So a mortgage broker is an intermediary between the lender and the customer, shop loans for different financial institutions and different loan products, and a loan officer represents a lender or financial institution and may work with a specific bank. So we do cover that quite extensively as an agency, just to make sure that the clients know who they're talking to when they start that process of trying to get a loan. And then the most important thing is the first step, which is research and education on purchasing a home. We really stress here at CSA that it is important that a client is able to get all the information that is available for them to start that process, and that they don't go in blindly as a first-time homeowner. So what we focus on is we sit down with the housing counselor. You may be sitting down with the housing counselor to review your affordability and determine if you are mortgage ready. If you are not, do not worry. We will work with you and we will do those extra steps, but we do focus on clients being able to be mortgage prepared, so they're not blindsided in the process. We encourage clients to talk to family, friends, coworkers about the experience of purchasing a home. It shouldn't just be talking one-on-one with a counselor. It's important to have an outside perspective of people that to have a realistic view on the length of the process, and also the commitment that is needed to be a homeowner. And feel free to talk to mortgage professionals without any commitment. And what I mean is that you should feel free to go into any lending institution, such as a bank, and ask questions, without any need for commitment or doing a credit check, or that any sort of that need. In addition, feel free to contact like real estate agents. It's just, talking to professionals to have a better idea of what they can do to help you purchase a home, and also what to prepare when you eventually get to that stage of purchasing a home. And then go online and do some calculations to see what you can afford. You'd be surprised that there's a lot of different calculators from lenders or different agents, to have a better idea. It won't be all set in stone, but it's good to always have an idea about how to purchase a home and what to expect. And then what can I go in for pre-purchasing? So CSA offers personalized counseling sessions to review your personal situation and get an estimate on how much you can afford pre-qualification. Now, we don't do it, but we usually would, give you a list of who you can contact, and, answer any questions that you have in regards to that. Okay, so I will give the floor to Matthew.
Great, thank you so much. I think when we look at home buying, it is an arduous process, and just having somebody on the phone to talk through kind of all the little pieces is extremely helpful, especially considering all of the different aspects that go into home buying, and learning about how to work with a broker or a realtor, and thinking even beforehand what kind of questions to ask. Certainly great to have that conversation with a counselor even before you reach out. And like you said, it's important to know that you can reach out to some of these agencies without that commitment, right? Their goal sometimes is to sell particular loans, et cetera. So knowing that you have those kind of agency to say, I'm just looking for information, can be really helpful. And having a counselor coach you on that beforehand is extremely helpful, to be able to kind of practice understanding what they're going to be looking for, what type of information to ask from who. All of those little details can be extremely helpful. So what I'm going to kind of transition into is that as you're going through this process, one of the things that CSA is really trying to keep an eye on is to make sure that discrimination is not happening in any aspect of that process of searching for a home. So we know it is a lengthy process. We know there are a lot of different people to speak with, a lot of different moving parts when you're buying a home. And all of those parts are supposed to adhere to federal fair housing laws. So that's one of the things that we certainly want to keep an eye out for. And the counselors will, of course, be ready to kind of guide you on those questions as well. So I wanted to go over some of the general issues that tend to come up when we look at discrimination, specifically in the home buying process. So to start off with, the federal fair housing laws protect home seekers and home buyers from discrimination on the basis of race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, and disability. And we'll get into kind of some more of those specific protected classes, but essentially somebody should not be discriminated against in their home buying process on the basis of one of the physical characteristics of who they are. The home buying process is specifically on your affordability of a particular property, and any of those external characteristics should not be taken into account in the process. However, we know that they do come up, and that's what we want to keep an eye on. Next slide. So in California, there's some additional protections. Specifically, California adds sexual orientation, gender identity, marital status, medical condition, ancestry, source of income, age, genetic information, and arbitrary discrimination, which really, arbitrary discrimination really covers any physical characteristics that are being predetermined as a precursor of a decision rather than the financial information. So if somebody has tattoos and they're being denied a particular aspect of the home buying process because of their tattoos, that could be considered arbitrary discrimination. Next slide. So the way the law is defining discrimination is really blocking someone's access to housing, treating one renter differently, or one buyer differently, or denying someone the right to buy a home, even though they can afford the property, all because of their membership in a particular group or protected class. Now, what's important here when the law is defining discrimination is that it really encompasses any aspect of the housing process. So when we look at home buying, there are a lot of different agencies that you need to speak with. You need to speak with a broker. You need to speak with the bank. You need to speak with realtors. You even need to speak with insurance companies about covering your home through insurance. And so all of those pieces, right, all of those agencies are encompassed within the law's definition of where discrimination can occur. So essentially any aspect of the home buying process is covered under the Fair Housing Act. So that's what's really important to remember from the law's definition of discrimination. Next slide. So some of the discriminatory practices that we do see in the home buying process is just a flat out refusal to sell housing. Certainly that's the way explicit discrimination might occur. We're not going to sell this house to you because we don't want somebody who is in an interracial relationship buying this home. We don't want somebody Black owning this home. Those types of explicit discriminatory practices are really something that is illegal under the Fair Housing Act. Sometimes we see steering occur where a realtor might say, oh, well, because you're Vietnamese, you probably want to look at homes within the Vietnamese community. So that type of steering where they're trying to only show particular properties in a particular area solely on the basis of somebody's protected class. So that's what we consider steering, and essentially it should be up to the home buyer where they want to live according to their affordability, and that those external aspects shouldn't be taken into account. Sometimes we hear about falsely denying that housing is available, where somebody will say, oh no, this house is already sold, even though it's on the market. Those types of kind of discrepancies that come up are indicators that discrimination might be occurring. Blockbusting is another strategy that's used where a realtor will start to indicate that a particular demographic is moving into a neighborhood and try and buy the properties at a lower price from the people that are living there, and then resell it to the particular demographic that's moving in at a higher price. So really kind of that manipulating of a neighborhood based on those discriminatory actions is what's termed blockbusting. And it's generally associated with race, that a realtor will sell a home to a Black owner and then in a predominantly white neighborhood, and then try and buy the homes of the other white owners, saying, there are more Black people moving into this neighborhood, you should sell your home at a lower price, and then sell to other Black owners at a higher price. So that's what's termed blockbusting, and something that we definitely want to keep an eye out for because it is an illegal practice. We also see a lot of advertising preferences, which we'll touch on, and then imposing different prices. Sometimes they'll have different deals or sales for particular demographics, but not for others. And sometimes we see this in the mortgage process as well. These are just some examples of how discrimination might occur in specifically the home buying process as well. Next slide. More specifically to kind of the real estate realm, we see, I talked about steering, but we also see kind of stalling to avoid a particular home, where somebody will say, oh, this home I really want to take a look at, and the realtor will take a longer time to respond to one demographic than another on their protected class. We know that in San Diego specifically, homes are selling instantly. It takes 2 or 3 days sometimes for a home to sell. So it's really critical that if somebody wants to see a home, that they're able to see it right away. And if a realtor is showing homes to one demographic quicker than to other demographics, that can be considered discriminatory practice, and something that we want to really take a look at. Refusing to negotiate with prospective buyers. Sometimes we see this with the people selling the home, that they don't want a particular demographic to buy the home. There were some questions that came up a couple years ago when the housing became such a hot issue, that home sellers were asking for letters from prospective buyers. And those letters sometimes included pictures of the individuals buying the home, which led to the person selling their home to be able to identify some of these characteristics of protected classes and say, you know what, I'd rather sell my home to this white family with their 2 little kids than to this African-American family who has a child with autism, right? Those types of discriminatory practices were able to occur just based on sending this letter saying, I want to buy this home. So those are kind of instances where we might see that refusal to negotiate with prospective buyers solely on the basis of their protected class. So they need to be able to kind of navigate those processes on equal terms to all prospective buyers in that sense. Next slide. We talked about some of this as well, but I also want to emphasize some of the zoning and enforcing zoning laws that might occur. This kind of happens on a more local jurisdictional levels where we see some redlining zoning that happens. This still does occur today sometimes, and is certainly something to make sure that it is not occurring. The other thing that's super critical is the intimidation, that if somebody is working with a real estate agent or a broker and they feel that they're being discriminated against, they can bring forward their complaint and should not be intimidated or assuaged in any way from bringing forward that complaint. And that intimidation factor is really critical. Next slide. Talking about mortgages, this is again one of those kind of forgotten realms of housing providing services where discrimination can and definitely does occur. We see a lot of appraisal discrimination where they'll go into homes and see particular images or photos of the family, and suddenly that home is appraised at a very much lower value. There have been instances where an African-American couple is trying to sell their home, and the appraisal comes in, and then they realize that it's a low appraisal. So what they do is they take out all of their images and they have their white friend go in and conduct the appraisal kind of meeting, and that home comes in at $150,000 higher than the initial appraisal. So that is a large discrepancy solely on the basis of the physical characteristics of an individual seller. So that's something that really plays into that discriminatory practice and differential treatment in the home buying and home selling process. So that the appraisal process is another critical aspect that comes into play. Imposing different loan conditions is going to be really difficult, and scrutinizing one loan application more closely because they may have children with disabilities or because of their particular national origin. Those are all focused on a particular protected class more so than the actual finances of trying to buy a home. And that's what we really want to keep an eye out for in the home buying process. Next slide. I touched on steering a little bit earlier, but again, I do want to make mention that the state of California has some expanded protections, especially when it comes to steering. And we often see steering occur in very subtle ways And that's what we really want to keep an eye out for. That if something feels off, that's what we want to take a look at. So it's illegal for a real estate agent to make, print, publish, or cause to be made, printed, or published any notice, statement, or advertisement with respect to the sale or rental of a dwelling that indicates any preference, limitation, or discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, handicap, familial status, or national origin, or intention to make any such preference, limitation, or discrimination. So even in the advertising realm, we see some subtle inferences that lead to steering practices, which we'll get into. But again, it's illegal to show certain areas to certain individuals as a realtor, or even kind of pushing one area over another. That can happen very subtly. Next slide. So in looking at what can be written into those advertisements, right? We see a number of things. Sometimes they might indicate they must be gainfully employed to apply, or must be a U.S. citizen to apply. Citizenship status, national origin are all protected classes under federal law. And so those types of explicit statements in the advertising are something that we definitely want to take a look at and make sure it's not occurring. Singles or professionals only. This is actually alluding to familial status as a protected class, where they're kind of pushing for the fact that they don't want children living in this particular area. And that is steering. It should be, if you have children, you should still be able to apply and live in that particular area. So these statements that might seem subtle, but really are pushing towards a specific demographic can be considered discriminatory. Sometimes we see Christians preferred. We also see that certain advertisements are listed at certain churches, right? But not at other religious institutions that are even in the neighborhood. So really thinking about where those advertisements are placed can really be indicative of what type of demographic they're searching for. For example, if it's only put at the church, you're only asking for Christian tenants to apply. And so because that limits who can apply to look at a certain home, you're really kind of limiting the demographic. And that's what discriminatory practice is. This can also apply to the images that are used to sell a home. If certain images are only using Caucasian models in the ad, that's certainly a problem. So even in the advertising, we see a lot of discriminatory practices that we want to make sure we're taking care of. So if you go on Zillow and you see some of these statements being made, then that's something we definitely want to take a look at. All right, next slide. So in regards to disability, the way the law is defining disability is any physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. This also includes a prior history of drug or alcohol abuse. But essentially, individuals with disabilities face particular discriminatory practices, even in the home buying process. And so when somebody outright says, I don't want to rent to you because you have a disability, or because someone in your family has a disability, that's certainly going to be cause for an investigation to then bring forward that complaint. One of the situations that has come up is questions arose in a situation where they were building homes, right, in this area, and one person has a disability and was requesting some alterations to the home to be built according to their disability. And wanted to move forward. So questions about, and then they were told, no, we don't want to make these particular changes, but they were making changes to some of the other homes according to the preferences of other potential buyers. So there was definitely a discrepancy there in terms of the treatment. So it brought up questions about, is this a discriminatory practice? So those are things to keep an eye out for as well, specifically with regard to individuals with disabilities in the home buying process. All right. Next slide. So with that, we are grant funded. If there are questions in kind of the home buying process, Ishel talked about our counseling services, but specifically if you've kind of gone about the home buying process on your own, and you're coming across something that feels iffy, or even as you're working with a counselor, feel free to reach out. All of our services are free because we are grant funded through HUD, through some of the local jurisdictions. And so we do offer that fair housing counseling to really walk through some of these situations. Ideally, if something comes up with a broker, with a real estate agent, we can sometimes provide that mediation just quickly. Here's what the law says. What you're doing may not fit within that law. And hopefully they would get their act together and start to figure things out. Or we kind of figure out what's going on and figure out a mediation way to move forward. We also provide fair housing seminars for both tenants, landlords, prospective buyers, real estate agents, really whomever's involved in that home buying process. We can talk about what these fair housing laws are and what they mean. And of course, all of our services are in English, Spanish, and Arabic. So we do have counselors that speak all three of those languages, really working to make sure that we're accessible in different languages. So essentially, we're here for everybody and anybody that wants to buy a home. We're here as that extra resource, and it doesn't cost anything but your time and that phone call to just check in. And even if you have any questions, we'll let you know if we can help with that question, or if not, hopefully we'll be able to find who can, another agency that can help with those questions. But essentially, we're here to collaborate with you to acquire a home. That it's a big step in asset acquiring, and does help in a number of different ways. So next slide. Please feel free to contact us. Our contact information is here as well as in the chat, and we'll open it up to questions.
Before we start our questions, can we clap again for that? That was a very, I'm over here taking notes. That was a really, really power-packed, informational things that people need right now. We just appreciate you all being with us this morning. One more time. Thank you for being here with us. I will read your questions. If you have questions and you don't feel comfortable coming off mute, add them to the chat and I can share them. I know just because we work with so many bridge parents, I do have one question. We work with a lot of bridge parents who, they'll see the resources that we share. Early on, you all are awesome at your social media because you post a lot of information as far as rental assistance. You share those much needed resources for our parents as well in your newsletter. And a lot of times we'll let our parents know. We get a call, they share that they have a need. So we've been sharing those things. And I know that you mentioned kind of in the beginning that you're seeing discrimination based on the kind of income that they're using. So can you share a little bit about what you all have seen with that happening? And just with regard to like rental assistance, I know now they have the security deposit assistance. Can you share what you've seen and kind of what to do? Because I know that a lot of people are taking advantage of that application process.
Yeah, I don't know, Ichil, if you have any thoughts as well, feel free to add them. But I think one of the things that, as I've been working with our legal counsel to kind of create some type of materials to send out, which I can send as well, to Melissa. One of the things that we're seeing as people are applying to rental assistance, and even outside of rental assistance, we'll see kind of explicit statements of, we don't accept any, extra funds, right? We don't accept Section 8. We don't accept rental assistance. Those types of explicit statements are really something that we definitely want to take a look at. As far as to kind of some of the subtleties that are happening with source of income, we do see sometimes that when somebody sees that somebody's applying with an extra source of income, such as Social Security income or Section 8, that all of a sudden the application conditions will change, where instead of asking for 2 times the rent, they now ask for 3 times the rent. So when those preliminary application requirements change because they find out that somebody's using a different source of income, that's a change of condition based on the source of income, and would constitute that discriminatory practice. As far as kind of the emergency rental assistance funding, right now, landlords, if they're going to go through a court system to evict somebody, which is the only way that somebody would lose out on living in their rental property, the landlord has to demonstrate that rental assistance not only was applied to, but that a determination was made on that application. And so that determination has to be made before a landlord can move forward in evicting anybody on non-payment of rent. If the eviction is for other issues, then that falls into a separate category. But if it's specifically for non-payment of rent, that rental assistance has to be applied for through the ERAP programming, the Emergency Rental Assistance Programming. Essentially, what that is saying is that if somebody's behind on the rents, they need to apply for emergency rental assistance funding before they can even be moved to be evicted out of their home. So that's one of the super important protections that we want to make sure that tenants are aware of, that, if they're getting those 15, 30, or 60-day notices for non-payment of rent, that they then go and apply to rental assistance and are moving forward in that process to get the funding to then pay for the landlord to stay in their homes. That's really the goal of the program. That's what we want to happen. Is that happening? We're seeing landlords just moving forward with the eviction, and tenants aren't aware of their protections with that regard. And we're also seeing kind of preliminary lockouts where the landlord will change out the keys. Wow. And not even go through the eviction process. Or we're seeing kind of just a lot of kind of, putting in that 30-day notice to pay or quit. And tenants are rather moving rather than kind of sticking out and saying, no, you're not allowed to do this. So those are the situations that are coming up. And again, we'll be sending out some messaging hopefully this week to kind of address that. But there are certainly a lot of issues with landlords and tenants not being aware of their rights and obligations when it comes to this emergency rental assistance funding.
Okay, I just thank you for clarifying that. I wanted to also share, we linked to CSA San Diego County's resource page, because there's a very, very good fact sheet on COVID-19 Tenant Relief Act and the Fair Housing Act just overall. It's in English, it's in Arabic, it's in Spanish as well. So we've linked to that underneath the September 15th video replay on our page, but we're going to also post that this Friday, a link to their resources page. And there's also a low-income housing list that we had linked in September. We will also link that with the video replay on Friday. And yes, I'm excited to get this up quickly by Friday, because it's just a lot of great information. I'm just going to check and see if we have any questions. Anyone have any questions for Iggy or Matthew? All right. Well, I don't see any questions. We're gonna end just a little bit early, but as always, please watch out for the replay if you missed any part or piece of today's webinar. The replay will be up. We'll also have the slides that you can download, because there's great information on the slides. And then also I will have links to the resources page. Stacia saying great information. Avon is saying great presentation, of very valuable information. Thank you. I fully agree. But all of the replays, the downloads, and links to resources with CSA will be available Friday. Thank you, everyone, for coming on live with us. Thank you to those who will watch it later. You all have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you.
So,
Bye-bye.
thank you so much, Melissa. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy.